I'm here with Rayann White, my good friend of 20 years, and we were just talking, we've been doing life together. We've watched our kids grow up together, baptized them together, served in ministry together, served outside of church events together, and have always honored and supported one another. But I know it's hard for people to believe, but you're black. Right?
Yeah, I am.
And I'm white, right? And, I think that you and I have just never really had conversations. We've had an understanding and trust with one another. But that still doesn't mean we don't need to have conversations. And I think what's so amazing about this, Rayann, and these times together is people like you and I, 20-year relationship, having an opportunity to have this kind of conversation, but also people we are not very familiar with having conversations with and being able to talk what's going on in our nation now. And I really believe as we get into this conversation, we're going to be talking about race and we're going to be talking about the good, bad, and the ugly of it. But we're also going to be talking about the most important principle as a Christian is that the only side we're supposed to choose is God's side. But that doesn't mean we turn a blind eye and turn away from injustice and what's wrong and from the spirit of racism, which I believe is a spirit of murder. As we had talked earlier, I believe it's a spirit of murder because people do die from it, but also it murders dreams, it murders visions, it murders relationships, it murders influence. It's such a murdering spirit. And I know racism is an ism, sexism and all the other, but I believe racism is the kingpin. I believe it's the ugliest and the most vicious that we can experience. And so I'm going to pray real quick, and then I just can't wait. I'm going to hear and want you to hear Rayann's heart, and we'll just have a conversation together today about race and about our country and just about God and where we think we should go. Okay?
Okay. All right.
Father, I just thank you for Rayann and Andy and the girls and just the relationship we've had for 20 years. And she just has such a heart to serve you and to honor you and to honor others. And God, I just know she's just got wonderful things to share with us today. And we're family and we're excited about it. And we give you praise for it in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. So we talked about a lot. We said we should have the microphones on, right?
Right. We've already had the conversation.
What's something you would just stand out to you about where we're at today? And what do you think is going on from your point of view, Rayann?
Well, as we were talking earlier, I was sharing with you that I do believe what's taking place is a move from God. I really do. Yes. I believe that there is just a lot of frustration within America today, be you black, white, red, yellow, green. There's a lot of frustration.
Republican, Democrat, CNN,
right, Fox, exactly.
Just pick one. CBS, LEX, exactly. It don't matter. NBC.
But I think there's just a lot of frustration, and I think it's years of buildup. It's kind of like plaque builds up on your teeth or whatever. This just years of on your heart.
Yeah.
It's years of buildup that's finally starting to be chiseled away. And I praise God for that, because I think we could go back even to 1992 with the Rodney King beatings and seeing that. But it seemed as though things sort of escalated at that point. You didn't really see as much of it in 1992. It was shocking to see it then, but now I don't even have a word for it because it's overwhelming. And I think right now we're in a place where people are saying enough is enough.
Yes.
We have endured racism long enough. And not even as a black person having endured it, but even as a white person having witnessed it and seen it and been a part of it. It's gone on long enough, and it's time that it stops. And when God brought this move in, this wave, this breeze that's going from nation to nation, city to city, country to country, I think that's sending a message out that there is, and it is now time for a change. And I think everybody ought to be excited about it, Pastor.
Yeah, and when you say change, and you and I talked about it earlier, a lot of times we think it's change an opinion, change a point of view, and that's part of it. But it really gets down when people say, well, there's no systemic racism, or there is systemic racism. Again, like Satan wants us to choose a side when we know that it is real and there is. And when I look at something systemic, that would be a culture, right? And I think and cultures and families are different. Like we were laughing, my wife, Steph, I mean, I love her parents. They're awesome. But the culture's different when I first started doing Christmas with them or Thanksgiving. The dinner's different. It's a different culture, but it's good. Go back to mine, it's blew Stephanie away, man. That hillbilly culture and everybody. She has one brother, right? And here we are. There's 10 of us running around with kids and grandkids. We had a village, and so neither one's wrong, right?
Right.
But I had to learn to flow with her culture. Mm-hmm. There were some things I didn't like about it. I like more people, this and that, and there was things she didn't like about my culture, but we didn't focus on what we didn't like because we love everybody in those cultures and say, how can we work these unconsciously? We work those cultures together. So when we look at our police department, or when we look at our Black community, white community, Asian community, when we look at our church community, we see that there's cultures within cultures. And when we want to see change, what's that say to you?
Well, when I see cultures within cultures, typically it's like you go to an event or you go to church. You typically migrate to the group, the culture that you're like. So I don't care where it is. It happens in church. It happens at work. It happens everywhere. And I think that it's almost like silos. I'm hearing silos. It's almost like silos. And I think sometimes we just need to set off a bomb or just diffuse it and we say that within the workplace. We need to break down these silos. You hear that was a buzzword years ago.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, the silos. Everything
now it's
was
not silos anymore. That's old leadership.
Yeah, that's
now, right?
That's old leadership
now.
Break them down.
It's a will now. Yeah. It's teams. It's not individuals. Yeah.
But we do need to take a look at that and step back and say, that's true. We are cultures within cultures. There are silos. There are teams, but I think it's time that we shatter all of those cultures, teams, silos, and we break out of those and start getting into other cultures and starting to understand and learn about what it was like for you, for Stephanie, when she came to your town, your family, and what it was like for you. But it's a learning experience. And isn't that a beautiful thing? Because I think that's what God wants. He doesn't want us all to be in one culture or clumped together, because I don't think heaven is going to be like that.
And it's like within your family, my siblings, we're all different, but we were raised by the same family in the same house, and some of us slept in the same bed, but we're different. Right.
But it's a beautiful thing.
And we're raised in the same culture, but we do our families a little different than our brothers and sisters because we have interpreted that and we picked our preferences and do it.
And there's nothing wrong with being different. I think there's beauty in that because I think I can learn from you and you can learn from me. And isn't that what we want? Because that's how we make the world a better place. And so I just feel the cultures within the cultures, are truly being chipped away and broken away. And I think people that may not even known or realize they were in a culture because they've been in that culture for so long, were saying, oh my God, I'm in a culture and I need to break out of this and realize that there are injustices happening within the world. I need to be a part of that. I first need to understand it, but now I need to be a part of this movement because I want to be a part of the change that God is making in our world today.
You said something really critical. Important when you first started talking. You said a lot of good stuff, but it really I never thought of it this way. But you said it's like a bomb, and we just need to blow this up. Then you changed it. Well, we need to, and you said disarm it. And I think if there's a bomb, a grenade, or say a bomb, and you got a military person and they know how to disarm it, it causes less damage and less harm than it explodes. Or even if you get away from it where it has less people injured or killed, you just let it explode. You don't know what to do with it. And I think that when we look at cultures, a lot of times it's not a culture is good or bad, but there's good and bad in every culture. And if we deny that, that's ignorance, really. We're ignorant to that. But the other piece of a lot of it's myth. Myth about, a black culture or a white culture or a hillbilly culture or an educated, wealthy culture or, a Baptist culture or a Pentecostal culture or a Hindu or Muslim culture or a Catholic culture, and I think that disarming part of that is learning what's truth and what's real and what's a myth.
Right. Kind of a lack of understanding, really. Just don't understand. I don't understand what it was like for you to grow up in Eastern Kentucky and in Appalachia, or what that culture was like.
You've done a lot of ministry and serving there. You know what?
Now I know.
Today,
now I know
more than most people would.
Right, and I didn't realize that. And I have to say that, when you don't understand, when you don't take time to really get to know or educate yourself, then you do have a bias against a particular culture or a particular race. But when I started traveling into Eastern Kentucky and going into the hollers, and it was a rude awakening for me. It was, number one, I thought Appalachia is absolutely beautiful. I mean, just the people, some of the people were, yes, I experienced racism, but then there were times that I was welcomed into a church. And so I just think it's understanding, a lack of understanding, and us trying to educate ourselves on the different cultures. Because when you do that, I think it's a learning experience. You're adding to your library, and then you're able to even speak more intelligently, and you're able to really be what God wants you to be, a disciple for him, because we can't be disciples in Lexington. We have to be disciples in Eastern Kentucky and in the Black neighborhood and in the white neighborhood. And that's why you see people of color, Black people, white people protesting. We've come out of our neighborhoods. We've come out of our cultures. We've come together to say, Black lives matter, and we need a change. And so I just think it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, I do too. And I think that, we all deal with prejudice, right? I had shared something with you, and I said, being a pastor, since I was young and pastoring in Columbus, Ohio, with a great church there, was the youth pastor in a church. We had 21 high school students. It grew to 900 and then a 1,500. And it was probably 75% Black and other, right? Mainly Black and some other. And, I was a minority in that, but I wasn't raised with bias because my mom and just our culture of our particular family. Now, that doesn't mean other people in my community wasn't. So it was easy for me to make the transition. Now, I got made fun of my accent and teased and all that. And then they endured me and loved me. Everybody did there, not just Black, white, or Hispanic, but just everybody there, because I'm a hillbilly in Ohio. I got the accent. But, I learned how to flow in that culture. And then coming here, now for 21 years, God's blessed us with a really, I always say multicultural, but it's really multi-ethnic. We have all different ethnic groups, a lot of different ethnic groups. And so I just thought I knew a lot more than I really did. And now I'm learning that you could say prejudiced things and not really be prejudiced, or you could say racist things and not really be racist. Now, we know there's racist people and prejudiced people and all that. But I used to say something in the pulpit a lot, and you've heard me say it, when something would come up about race or something, I say, look, I don't see color. I'm like God. God doesn't see color. Well, what a lie. God made all the colors. He intentionally made all of us and designed every pigment, every hair, he made us. So for me, I was trying to say from my culture or my background is like, I want everybody to know I don't see color because everybody's the same to me. But to a person of color, it could be like, well, you don't value my color? You don't, what do you mean you don't see my brown skin, my black skin, my olive skin? Well, you see it when you're following me in the store. Yeah, when and I'm you trying see to make it. A purchase. Right. And what I didn't realize was that that's not acknowledging the pain. Right. That a person of color has been through, or acknowledging what it costs to be them. I'm just kind of, that's a good way to pull back and not make it an issue, rather than really accepting that, wow, I need to change that. That's the wrong thought process. That's the wrong perspective. But if I hadn't had a couple of good friends, as we were talking like you and I wouldn't knew. Because I asked, is that offensive? They said, well, I love you, Pastor, and I know you don't mean it, but yeah, it's kind of offensive, and I'm like, man, I was like, well, you suck because you should have told me that. You've known me 10, 15 years. You know what I mean?
What kind of friendship do we have? What kind of friendship do we have?
You let me go here and be an idiot,
I've been saying this for years.
Yeah, I know. It's like somebody should have slapped my hand or said something or something. But isn't that funny how it's kind of like this, I think. When we're around people like us, right? We will grace them. Like, where we have a culture of being a multi-ethnic church and we know each other's heart, and you all know my heart, and I know, and all that, you will be more enduring and gracing me when I say something stupid because you've seen me walk out my life, right? And maybe it's a blind spot I have or just a dumb thing, whatever. But if I'm not like you, we have similar religious beliefs and family beliefs and moral beliefs and all that, right? But if it's somebody out here that's, they're not like you or me as much as we're like one another, right? Then do we have the same grace for them?
Right. I like what you say about, being honest. You're being honest and upfront about saying that, oh, I don't see color, because you hear that. But that's not true. People do see color. And I just want to share this story. And people see color, saw color hundreds of years ago, and they still see it today.
Yes.
We were visiting our daughter in Chicago, and we were on the Magnificent Mile, just, shopping, doing some shopping, went into one particular store, had made some purchases. We're on our way out the door, and there were a couple of folks that ran past us, or walked swiftly past us. And as we were trying to get out the door, they got out the door ahead of us. A buzzer went off, ding, 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 and the gentleman stops us and says, "What are you doing? What are you doing? I need to check your bags. I need to check your bags." I mean, just immediately accuses us of having placed something in our bags that we shouldn't have. First of all, we're Christians, but you don't know that. You're just looking at my color, so you do see color, and now you're falsely accusing me. Well, this man tried to hold us hostage for it, and finally, I'm like, okay, we don't have anything in these bags that we should not. You're welcome to check them, but you've got the wrong people. It was the folks prior to us that ran through the door, basically. And it was another lady that stood by and said, "You got the wrong folks. It's not them. It was the other people that ran out of the door." This was right before COVID hit. Come on, before COVID.
Yeah.
So we do see color, and it's not that people should feel bad about saying it, but they should embrace that we have a uniqueness within each culture that they see, and so while my words may sound different from the way you say something, it's kind of like foreign languages. I may say something differently than the way you say it, but we're saying the same thing.
Right.
But it doesn't mean that I'm better than you or you're better than me. We're
both trying to get to Cincinnati from Lexington. We might take a different route.
Right.
We're going to be in Cincinnati.
We're going to be either way. So I think people just embracing the difference that we have in our color, and in the way we speak. And it's so funny you say when you're with one of your friends, you can talk one way. And it's true. When I get around my black friend, girl, all that's, but then when I'm at work, then sometimes, and they laugh because sometimes I'll say things and I'm like, okay, this is what I actually meant. So it's just a difference in cultures. It's a difference in how we sometimes may speak, or even in the way that we sometimes may look. But it doesn't mean that it's one is wrong and one is right.
Yeah, and I think what we're probably getting to is we got to give one another space. To be who we are. And to be right, to be wrong, or we'll never knock the myths down. And and I think too, affirm the things that we do agree with one another, and then feel the empathy for the things we don't agree on. Because basically, Jesus said in Mark 12, right, when they asked him, the Pharisees in Mark 11 were trying to trick him, and because he's doing all these miracles, and they see all these people following him, and then they said to Jesus, they said, "We're going to ask him a question." They said, "Well, whose power do you do this by?" Well, they thought, well, he's been saying he's the Son of God over here every now and then, so if he says that, we can stone him, right? And he said, well, I'll tell you what, I'll answer that question if you answer this question. And he said, by whose power did John the Baptist do what he did under? And they knew, John the Baptist, if we come against him, if we choose that, then the people will stone us. But if we choose to agree that he got it, he did it under God, then Jesus could say he did it under God, and we agree with him. And so they conspired together, like, we only got one of two choices. This is not good. It's binary. They just said, well, we don't know. Thinking maybe he'd say something. He said, well, I'm not going to answer your question either. And what Jesus was saying is, you're choosing what you're doing is, and he knew in their mindset there was only a binary, but in God there's three options, not two, right? And God has a whole nother option.
Yes.
And then later on, just in the next chapter, whenever they ask him, well, what's the greatest command? Well, they thought, any one of these 10, how are you going to pick the greatest if you get it wrong? And he said, I'll tell you, all the commands are good, but the greatest is these. They're new, and I'll give them to you. And he's like, love the Lord thy God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. I think a lot of people forget that. And the second is like it, love your neighbor as yourself. Now, when he said, love the Lord thy God with all your heart, mind, strength, Christians and people go, well, yeah, you should. Strength means energy, effort. It means you make an effort. You don't just say, oh, I love you, sis, when you don't, right? You know what I mean? I love you, but I don't like you. Well, then you don't love me, right? And so there's such power in that, because when you look in John 17, the final prayer Jesus prayed before he was put in jail or taken in to be judged and crucified, he prayed that the Father not take us out of the world, but keep us in the world. But we, the church, would become one as he and the Father are one. And what's that? And then he said, then they will know I sent them, and they will know because I sent them who you are. The world will know. And I think we, as children of God, are telling a very poor story because we don't see people that are not like us as our neighbor. You know, if I have a Muslim neighbor, a Hindu neighbor, an atheist neighbor, a neighbor that lives a totally different lifestyle than me, then they're still my neighbor. Right. And I got one requirement: to love them as I like Dalton pretty good. You know, I like me pretty well. I don't have a problem with that. Some people have a problem not liking themselves. I like myself. And so when I do that, I go, man, I love old Dalton. So that means, man, they're a lot. I don't believe like that, or I don't like the way they discipline their kids, or whatever it is, or whatever it might be, but they're my neighbor. Right. Isn't there power in that?
Oh, there is power in that. And I think we forget that word. That's a good word, because we do have to love our neighbor as ourselves. We can't pick and choose, you know, to love that neighbor to the left and not that one to the right, or, you know, or in general, just, you know, it's love your neighbor as yourself, not necessarily in your neighborhood, but your neighbor, people you come in contact with in the world.
Everyone's our neighbor.
Right. You know? And we have to love them as ourselves, because that's what we as Christians have been commissioned to do. And if we are like God, and if Jesus lives in us and we are like him and we are his disciples, then that's what we are called to do. So even when we are out, if we're protesting, or if we're out marching peaceably, or if we're in a discussion like you and I are having, we have to be able to walk away saying, you know what, I may not have agreed with a particular point, he said, but I still love him, because God has told me to love him. He is my neighbor. And, you know, and then I'm going to just carry on and continue to befriend him and be his neighbor as God has commissioned me to do, because that's what we're supposed to be. But I think sometimes, you're right. I mean, you know, sometimes we look at other people that don't look like us and we say, oh my gosh, well, you know, they look like this or they look like that. And, you know, and we back away, or we don't want to have a relationship with them. But, you know, it's, again, breaking down the silos, breaking down the walls, you know, and saying, let me get to know that person, because, you know, there could be some Jesus in them. I could learn something from them.
And
or
if there's
together,
not, there never will be if Jesus people don't show Jesus.
If we're not showing
we're the only hands and feet and mouthpiece that God has. Right. The Holy Spirit works to us. Right.
And so we have to be the hands and feet of Jesus, you know, and, you know, and like you said, not to label people. You know, I work in a position where it would be easy to label the people that I work with, but I can't do that, because I have somewhat of an understanding from where they've come from and some of the things that they have endured. And so for me, I'm to love them and hopefully their love, Christ's love within me, because I always say, Lord, let your light so shine in me so that when others see it, that, they'll see the glory and they'll also want to serve you. That's the word. And so that's what I try to do and every morning say, and Lord, who is it that you have waiting for me, that you want me to speak into? Who do you want me to bless? Because I believe that even during these times of what we're going through right now, God has people positioned for us to speak to or speak into, to be a blessing to, and to share whatever word it is that he wants us to share with them. So, if we're the hands and feet of Jesus, and if we're saying, Lord, I need you to just tell me who it is you want me to bless you today. I'm not saying, Lord, who is the black person that you want me to bless today? Lord, lead me to that black individual that needs a word. No, I'm saying, Lord, as your hands and feet, God, lead and guide me. Lord, who is the person that you have positioned today for me to speak into? Because it doesn't matter to me whether they're white or black. I want to be what God has called me to be. I want to do what he's called me to do, and I want to go where he's called me to go at whatever risk that is. I want to be the hands and feet of Jesus so that when I get to heaven, he can say, there's that one that I told you that day to go and speak to. And there's that other one that I told you, instead of, you were too concerned about color. You weren't loving your neighbor as yourself. And because of that, you missed it. You missed it. And we don't want to miss it.
You're right on. And here's the power of labeling. And I think this is a blind spot to Christians, to me, to all of us to an extent, because really there's one label. It's not black, white. It's not American, Russian, Ukrainian, Mexican, or none of that. It's neighbor. It's not saved or unsaved. It's neighbor. It's not Hindu or Muslim. It's neighbor. It's not anarchist or what you call the Nazi stuff. It's neighbor. So if we are not giving people the benefit and finding ways we can connect, understand, then we're never going to win them, to be a child of God, because God, none of us deserve the love we got. None of us deserve God's grace. Jesus died for everyone. And for me to say, well, those people there, I can't relate to them, or they're not worth my time, or they're crazy, or whatever they are, they're different than me, then I really don't believe what I'm saying. I think most Christians, well, yeah, anybody that comes in my presence, if I can witness to them, do you really? Or do you grab your purse and look that way? Or, do you hit the gas or roll your window? I mean, I don't know. I'm not judging someone's fear or anything like that. I'm just saying we as individuals and human beings need to understand that it's up to us to love first, because God first loved us. And then when we look at labeling, I think something is really, you and I discussed earlier, there was a wonderful pastor in San Diego who's, he's multicultural. He's Asian, black, white. I mean, he has a great perspective, a former NFL football player, pastors like 20,000 people, just an amazing man of God. And he wrote a great book called The Third Option. People should get it, read it. But anyway, he made a statement. He said, growing up, I grew up in a black neighborhood, but I went across a few blocks down to a white neighborhood. I was in a white school, but I grew up in a black neighborhood. So he said, me being mixed, he said, when I went to school, I was the N-word. But when I came home, I was just as afraid till I got a block from my house because I was whitey. And, so he said, I always lived in that turmoil. And he said, later on, God navigated me through it. I got saved and all that. But, what he said was so powerful. He said, and the way I think I relate it when we talk about labeling, he said, is I'm left-handed. He said, I grew up left-handed. Well, when we talk about prejudice, right, the world is right-handed prejudice. Right, it's prejudice toward right-handed people, right? Because when you're growing up in a school, the desks are not made for a left-handed person; they're made for a right-handed person. So your whole time as a left-hander, you're trying to figure out how to write. And he said, "So we do what? What if you took a right-handed person and put them in an all left-handed prejudice world?" And he said, "That's the power of it." And he said, "I've encouraged some of my white friends, and I think his wife was white. He was like, I've encouraged some of my white friends. He's a little fearful, this and that. Said, look." Why don't you go to a neighborhood or a store somewhere where you're the only white person in that store. You're the only left-hander there. And then see if you feel there's any bias or any prejudice. So I think there's such power in understanding, and there's such power in labeling. And it is like, you know, we live in a left-handed world or a right-handed world, and we gravitate. If we're left-handed, we're going to, you know, left-handers, you know, Pastor Steph's left-hander, Pastor Mark's left-hander. And so we go out to eat at lunch. I'm like, okay, Mark, you got to sit over here. You know, she's left-handed. I can't eat because I'm trying to eat, and she's got her left hand, and he laughs. And they make jokes about me because they're what? Left-handed. So, but most time, I'm the one, you know, I'm right-handed with more right-handed people. But isn't it funny how Ann said, how the labeling takes effect, and we miss the opportunity to disarm the left-handed world and the right-handed world, and we're all one world and one neighborhood and one neighbor, because we fail to understand what it's like to live in a left-handed world.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. It's funny. I was left-handed. But back in the day when I was born, many years ago,
changed because of that.
My mom changed me because of that. And so now I write with my right hand, but I can still ambidextrous. I can still write with my left, you know. But I like what you're saying about the labeling. We do label people based on, you know, and we were talking about this earlier. Sometimes we label people based on where they live or how they dress or what they drive, you know, or even the church they go to. Okay, let's go even further. The people they hang out with. And so we label them based on whatever categories we have within our, going back to cultures.
Yeah.
We label them based on that. And I think because of that, we limit ourselves, or we restrict ourselves from being all that God has called us to be, because we're not going to maybe minister outside of our label or outside of our culture, because it's just, and I don't even know if people are conscious of that. They may not even be conscious of it, but it just goes back to what you're saying. We have to, you know, do away with the labels. You know, just because Nike has a swoosh doesn't mean that Adidas isn't a good as good quality. You know, it's just a different name. You know,
different
and so
label.
A different label. And so we have to kind of remove the labels. If you like it, you like it.
We make one label, neighbor.
Right.
You know,
right,
I'm your
right,
neighbor, you're
right.
my, I mean, when you really think about it, the power of that is so, I mean, Jesus, man, he just cut right through the stuff, right? And just like, you know, we're neighbors. I mean, you're my neighbor, I'm yours. And
we need to love each other.
A stranger at the gas station is my neighbor. And when we get that, and there's such power when I approach someone that, you know, I accept them as they are, not as I think they should be. So here's another thought. Like, we all are controlled by our beliefs. So we might say we're not, but we are, right? You know, if you, whatever our beliefs are, if I have a belief that certainty is one of my top human needs, then, you know, I'm going to be more controlling. I'm going to be more OCD. I'm going to be more of a perfectionist. I'm going to, you know, but you know, if it's more like variety, adventure, then I'm going to be the opposite of that. But neither one's right or wrong, because God gave us 6 human needs. That's 2 of them. And he wants us to have all those. But the key is loving people that are they're more endeared to different human needs than us. And because of what they believe. And I think that with us, we all have experiences. And so I remember being the poor white kid, you know, right? And I remember a friend of mine that they had a pool, and you had a pool in our county. There might have been 3 in the whole county at that time. And I remember going over, and we were good friends, but the dad would never let me swim in, and I'm the poor kid across from the trailer court. You know, I don't know if I want, and I had to it took me half a summer to win the dad over. He saw, I'm not, you know, going to steal something, and I'm not afraid of trash or whatever you wanted to call me. And I got to swim in that pool. You know, at the time, I didn't realize inside me how lesser it made me feel. Right. So that could have easily controlled my belief.
That's true.
That's
a good point.
Anybody that's got more than me, right? I got to be less than to get and to kind of play the role.
But the the beauty of it is you didn't hold on to that.
I didn't hold on to that.
And you didn't allow it to stifle you or to stop you from being all that God had called you to be. Some people do, but you didn't allow that, because sometimes words hurt.
Oh, the words are powerful.
And, and so we don't want to, and I don't think you or I are saying that, prejudice, racism doesn't exist. We're not saying that.
Does.
It exists, but we're saying that we too, because there are some opportunities that we have, or or that we hesitate because we feel like, how will somebody accept me if I go up and say this because I'm Black and they're white, but we just have to take that, we have to trust in the Lord. And if the Lord tells us to go and speak to that person, then we should speak into him. But
and you're right. And we believe what? Based on our experience.
On our experience.
So I could live that. I've had friends and even family that never could overcome that.
Yeah.
And they always felt lesser than.
Yeah.
And you would see them around one group of people, and they were the life of the party. You see them around another group of people that hold their head down and they didn't want to be a part of it. And it was weird. And I'm trying to make them, but why is that? It's because the root, your conditions, your experiences condition you.
Right.
And then that gives you the perception.
Right.
Remember, we talked about a friend that I have that is a white dude, and he's like, man, I just have to kind of really think this through. I never thought I had any privilege. I didn't think I was white privilege or privilege and all that. He said, but man, I was raised in a upper middle class professional family and, was part of a big business and all that. And he said, I'm sitting here going, yeah, now there's nothing wrong with being privileged, right? What's wrong is when we can't see other people's lack of privilege, and so it's really helping him to take more time to say, I'm not going to just shut out everything everybody's saying. I got to assess my heart. I got to assess who I am, and I got to feel empathy. I got to learn that I can disagree with someone and still love them as they are, even though I always thought I could. But I guess my perception was, come on, just pull your bootstraps up. You can do it. You're no different than me. It's hard work. Well, no, we know that's not true. That's part of it. But the big part of is, a lot of people are not persistent because they've been conditioned that I tried that 2 or 3 times and why try it again.
Right. And it's I like what you say about, having to win this person over. It's unfortunate that you have to do that.
And make yourself lesser.
And make yourself
play a role.
Or dumb yourself down. I used to tell my girls, because you are, a Black female, and
I want to say she can talk to this because if you don't know Rayann has been in the corporate world her whole adult life. She's obviously an attractive, brilliant lady. She's Black. If you haven't noticed, she's Black. And she's a woman living in a man's world, especially back when you first started in all this. And there probably wasn't very many board tables that had a lot of people the same as you, right? Whether it's female, Black, whatever. You constantly... So when y'all need to listen, when Rayann starts speaking what she's telling her girls, this is a woman that's had the experience and come through and is still thriving today.
Yeah. I used to share with my girls, and I think one of the reasons that I worked so hard, Pastor, is because I wanted to prove to my daughters and show them that you can be and do anything that you set your mind to, as long as you keep God first. I used to always share that with them. Don't ever let anybody tell you that you can't be, because God says, you can do all things through Christ who strengthens you. You got to remember what your foundation is, and that's Jesus Christ. And as long as you keep him as your foundation, he'll open doors for you that no man can open and shut those you don't need to go through. But I used to always tell them, one of the things that will happen in this house is that you will get a good education. You will get your education, because that's something no one can take away from you, because you are going to be Black females in a white society. And so because of that, people are going...
You're a left-handed professional in a right-handed professional world. Right. Yeah.
And people are going to try to make you feel... try to stifle you and make you feel that everything you say is not right, or everything you do is not right, or the way you...
And it's some of those are intentional, some are unintentional because of biases they don't even know they have.
Exactly.
Because of the conditioned way, that's the way the guy that hired me treats people. I guess that's the way I'm supposed to treat people. He leads that way, she leads that way, maybe I should lead that way, unconsciously. And some do it consciously. But
I used to tell them, you have to be And it's sad that you have to tell your daughters this. I don't have sons, but I can only imagine the conversation that mothers, Black women have had with their Black sons, you know, but I used to say to them, you have to be that much better. You know, and isn't that sad? Because even in 2020, I still feel like that, that I have to be that much better. Because even when I go into a place of employment, and I always say, God sends me into these places that, you know, like, okay, Rayann, I'm sending in you here because, you know, this is going to happen.
I've seen you go into them and just be for a number of years, and then God said, okay, that's good. Now go do this one. You're like, what? I got to do that again.
I know. It's like, and I know I've had conversations with you. I've called you, Pastor. I just don't know if I can, you know. But, you know, I knew God had placed me there for such a time as this. But, you know, I've always shared with them, just know who you are in Christ.
That's it, man.
Don't ever allow anybody to take you out of who you are or whose you are. And don't ever allow anybody to dumb you down. I used to say to them all the time, you're a Christian, you're not a doormat. You know, and God will give you whatever words it is that you need to speak. Because I've been in so many situations where I've been the only female, the only Black sitting around a boardroom. You know, I'm the one that brought a program to the table, hired the people for the program. And then when we're sitting around with the people that have been hired and the CEO and the president, everybody is introduced but me. That's a true story.
Yeah, that's scary.
I mean, completely overlooked, you know. I've been in the workplace where I have created a program, you know, I mean, saved the company millions of dollars. Okay. And then that program taken from me and given to my white counterpart and said, she's going to be the one to run it. And her name is going to be on it. You know, I can go on and on with the stories, which is why it was so important for me to tell my daughters that, you know, education is key. I want you to get that education, but I never want you to allow somebody to make you feel less than.
So good.
You may not talk the way they talk. You may not write the way they write, but that doesn't mean they're better than you. It certainly doesn't mean you're better than them. And I would tell them it doesn't matter so much how people treat you, but it matters a whole lot how you treat them. We've got to answer to God one day.
We got to treat our neighbor
and we want to make
as
sure
ourselves. That's
love your neighbor. So, you know, for my girls, you know, both doing well, and both very proud of what God and how He's using them. But I, you know, just the stories that I would have to share with them about this is why Mom worked so hard, because I want to prove to you that I can be a pharmaceutical drug rep. You know, they say, oh, Mom, you can't watch me. So then I'd go out, true story, I'd go out, Mom, you can't do that. Oh, I can't? Well, why not? God says I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. So I went out, got the interview, came back. Guess what, guys? I'm a pharmaceutical rep. You kidding, Mom? You did? Wow, yeah. But look what happens when you put your trust in God. I'm not saying that I'm not a Black person living in a white society. I haven't experienced racism. I have, but I have been on my knees and in prayer and in fasting years and years and years when I didn't have children. And now that I have children, you know, asking the Lord, saying, I know that prejudice is real. I know that we face this as a Black people. I know this, but I know that you're a God who sits high and look low. And I know you're a God that favors me. And I know you're a God that opened every door that needs to be opened for me, and you'll shut every door that needs to be shut. And I am telling you, even getting emotional now, that God has opened doors for me that no man can shut. Even when they've tried to shut it, God has said, you know, even now, you know, things that have happened on my job, when we had the governor here, I was laughed at. Oh, who does she think she is? That she can happen to know? You know, the governor, What happened? The governor was here. After it was over, oh my gosh, oh, the governor, oh my gosh, Rayann. And I just looked at him and said, is anything too hard for God?
Come on.
And I walked away.
Come on.
Is anything too hard for God?
Come on. That's
and so I just, you know, want to encourage everybody today that while you may be experiencing racism, you may have, you know, or prejudice of all kinds on your job, in your community, hold your head up. Be proud of who God created you to be. You are a child of the Most High King, and greater is He that is in you than he that is lives in the world. No good thing will He withhold from them that walk uprightly with Him. And God has not withheld anything from me. I'm telling you, I just got a phone call today God just always amazes me, because here, and even where I'm working now, it's like, you're the only Black person, on the board. You have a board, you're the only, and I said, we need to diversify that. But God has allowed me to come in, Pastor, and honestly, the governor, I just got confirmation today that Nicole C. Mullen accepted my invitation to come and speak at our gala in October.
Wow.
People, who does she think she is? That's what I always get. Well, who does she think she is that she can call? It's not me. It's the God that lives in me. And I'm a Black person, so this is the God that lives in me that doesn't see my color, that says, I'm opening up this door for her.
Come on.
Because she is my child, just like you are his child.
What you took the beliefs being raised as a young Black girl, a left-handed person living in a right-handed world, right? But you began to work on those beliefs.
Right.
And you put your trust in God, and your belief system in Him is greater than what you experience here in this world.
Beliefs my mother and father put in me. My mom used to always say, you can do all things through Christ who strengthens you, Rayann. Because I had low self-esteem. I was shy,
It's hard to believe you were shy.
I know.
You're like the most outgoing person I know.
But I am. And people are like, come on. I was telling my core group, they were like, Rayann, stop it. You are not.
I love it.
But, my mom used to always say, you can do all things through Christ. And that's just a scripture that has always resonated in me and that I've always shared with my kids and even my granddaughter. And she'll even say, and she'll say something to me and I'll say, Jasmine, and she says, I know. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. So.
Well, and here's something cool. We'll talk about this. I guess we'll wrap up in a minute. Okay. But Rayann, as one of our coaches, we call it coaching when we're discipling people and discipling leaders. And we have calls every week, Zoom calls, and we have different people. I do 2 calls. Other people do calls. Rayann's one of those leaders that does calls. And what blows me away, it's been so cool. We got about 100 leaders on these calls every week. And there's anywhere from 6 to 8 per call. And it's the same group growing together. We have a curriculum and stuff, but times like this, we come off it, which has been beautiful. We were already dealing with it with COVID, right? And coaching people about fear, this and that. And then this whole incident hit, with the race and, all these, but really it's a dangerous opportunity, right? And I was saying, what's so cool? I'm looking at my screen and it's Black, white, Asian, mixed, it's young, old, and both my groups are so diverse. I'm just sitting there going, wow, God, you're amazing. It gives us, I tell people all the time, and I got this from our friend Tim Walden, we have, as Christians, we have an unfair advantage, right? Because like you said, God strengthens us, greater is He's in us. We do, if we will tap into His belief system versus what we've experienced, right? And what do you think about on your calls? I know my calls have been, I've learned so much. A lot of what I'm talking about right now is from the last several weeks, because we're such a diverse group, learning from each other, little myths and idiosyncrasies that you just didn't even think about, right? But they make a huge difference. How about you while you're leading your call and it being diverse? How's that working? And what do you do?
It's wonderful. I mean, we initially started out not knowing or being familiar with one another, and we've all grown very close. And we've talked about the issue of prejudice and racism, and it's funny how, not funny, but the different perspectives that everyone has, because everyone grew up differently in a different culture.
Beliefs, experiences, belief systems, which creates a different culture.
Exactly. And so everyone kind of shared that particular culture of how they grew up. One saying, I grew up in an all white, I didn't see a Black person till I was 12. Okay. So that was her culture. Somebody else, well, like you said, I didn't see color, but now I know that we do actually see color. So the conversation was one that was from, I didn't see a Black person till I was like 12 or 13, to I didn't see color, but now I do. And I think having the conversation helps us to really build on a better world and a better relationship.
Better neighborhood.
And a better neighborhood.
That's so important. And I want to encourage everyone out there to lead. This is our time to lead. And God has raised you up for such a time as this. And we are to lead leaders, lead anyone that will follow you And it's such a critical moment. And that when you choose a side, you always choose God's side. And if I truly love God with all my heart, my soul, my mind, and my strength, that means my effort, my energy, then I got to do, he said, the second commandment is equal to it. He said, love your neighbor as yourself. And, that's our goal. I know it's Rayann's goal, my goal, and Bethel Harvest's goal, and the goal for this podcast, because we started all this just 2 years ago, supernatural advancement through clarity, growth, and vitality. And it's just been wild how God has just used that. And one of the reasons I wanted to do this podcast is, this is an opportunity for us to live a life of vitality, but we can't get it without clarity.
Right.
Because you're not going to grow without clarity. You've got to get clarity. So clarity is not just a vision, a dream of where I want to go. Clarity is understanding my neighborhood, understanding where I'm at, and who I am, and who I need to become, and how I need to grow. But who am I bringing with me?
Oh, that's good.
Who am I bringing with me?
Yes.
And that's so critical. And I just want to encourage everyone out there. Man, when I just love Rayann and Andy and her girls, and just
love you.
They've always been such a support staff, and and they serve. I mean, man, she's a servant in the kingdom. She's always been right there, rolled her sleeves up from the time we just started as a church till all the way through. And that's what being a good neighbor is. And Rayann, is there anything you'd like to say before we pray out here?
Well, let me just read this poem by Cleo Wade, and I'll let that close out. But let me also say that I love my pastor. I do. And I love how he has opened up this conversation and being very transparent in how he used to think, how he thinks now, and even allowing conversations like this to take place. And so we thank you for that. I mean, we are a multicultural church, and I think that we've always have been ever since I've started. And I love that. And I've never, ever since I've walked through the doors, that's the one thing that brought me was the love that I felt and the acceptance. And I love the fact that you and Pastor Steph have always opened your doors to whatever need that I've had, or be it a conversation or a phone call. You all have always been there for me. Even when I wanted to start a business, I came and talked to you all, and Pastor Steph, and she, talked me through it and led and guided me. And then after it happened, I came to you and spoke to you. So you're always there. And I appreciate that. And I appreciate you being a part of this movement, because this will go down in history. It is a movement.
It really is.
But I'm going to read this. It says, it's a lady by the name of Cleo Wade. She says, the world will say to you, we need to end racism. Start by healing it in your own family. The world will say to you, how do we speak to bias and bigotry? Start by having the first conversations at your own kitchen table. Wow. The world will say to you, there's too much hate. Devote yourself to love. Love yourself so much that you can love others without barrier or without judgment.
Wow. That sums it up, doesn't it?
Yep.
It's about love, and it's about loving our neighbor. Yeah, about loving your neighbors yourself. And we really didn't dive into it. We may have to do another one sometime about the whole labeling thing.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's really powerful when we can relabel, instead of saying, going by myth or, what we perceive people to be, but learn a true reality and then relabel people as our neighbor and look at our similarities instead of our differences. And because family's family, right? Families fight and make up and hang out and pout and have fun together. And, the world should be no different. We should be the same. So, well, we love you guys, and we already prayed opening, so we love you, and thank you, Rayann.
Thank you, Pastor.
Love you. You are amazing, and we enjoyed it. So we'll see you soon.